Declan Voss ran. Not the heroic kind. The kind where a man's left boot had a crack in it and his sock was wet, and the ceiling of an alien palace was gone, and warships were eating each other alive in the sky above him. He ran through corridors that had been beautiful 3 hours ago, marble-like stone, carved with the histories of a species that had ruled 11 star systems before breakfast. Now the carvings were rubble. The histories were gravel under his boots, his wet, cracked, miserable boots. A beam collapsed behind him. He didn't look back. Looking back was for people who had options. Sergeant Declan Voss, human, 34 years old, attached to the Allied Xeno Coalition as a cultural liaison, which was military code for the guy we send so it looks like we care, had no options. His extraction shuttle had been on Landing Pad 7. Landing Pad 7 was now a hole in the ground deep enough to bury a building in. His squad was scattered. His comms were dead. His sock was wet. He kept running. The palace of the Valith hegemony had been designed to make visitors feel small. It worked even in ruins. The halls were built for beings that averaged 8 feet tall, with ceilings that soared into darkness and doorways wide enough to drive trucks through. Declan, at 5'11", felt like a rat in a cathedral. He turned a corner and found a throne room. Or what was left of one. The roof was gone. Clean gone, like something had peeled it off with fingers. Through the gap, Declan could see the battle Valith warships firing on Valith warships, the sky streaked with light and debris. A civil war performed at orbital speed. The throne itself was intact. Massive thing, carved from a single piece of dark stone, sitting on a raised platform at the far end of the room. Around it, scattered like dropped toys, lay the bodies of the Queen's personal guard. 12 of them, all dead, all still in formation, which meant they died standing, died in position, died doing exactly what they were supposed to do. And on the steps below the throne, the Queen sat. Sareth Talveen, Empress of the Valith hegemony, keeper of 11 sons, sovereign of 900 billion souls. She was taking off her armor. Not in panic, not in surrender. She was removing each piece with the care of someone folding laundry after a long day. The chest plate, the shoulder guards, the ceremonial gauntlets that Declan knew from his briefing materials weighed more than he did. She stacked them beside her in a neat pile, her 4-fingered hands moving with a precision that made his chest tight for reasons he couldn't name. She was tall. Even sitting, she was nearly his height. Her skin was the color of deep water in moonlight, blue-gray, faintly luminous. Her eyes were solid black, no whites, no iris, just depthless dark that reflected the burning sky above them. She looked at him. "Leave," she said. Her voice came through his translation implant a half-second after her mouth moved. The implant made her sound calm. Declan suspected the original was something else entirely. "Leave," she said again. "Everyone has." Declan looked around the throne room, at the dead guards, at the empty halls beyond, at the sky full of betrayal. "Can't," he said. "I am not asking. I know I'm not refusing, I'm just my shuttle's gone. Pad 7, it's a crater." She stared at him. He could feel the weight of it, those black eyes processing him the way a computer processes bad data, with confusion, then annoyance, then something close to a system error. "You are the human," she said. "Yes, ma'am." "The cultural liaison." "That's what it says on the paperwork." "You cannot pronounce my species name correctly." "No, ma'am." She looked at him for a long time. The sky burned behind her. A warship broke apart in the upper atmosphere, its death a slow orange streak that painted the throne room in firelight. "My generals have taken my empire," she said. The words came out flat, factual, like a weather report about the end of everything. "They conducted the coup through a legislative session, a vote. While the orbital bombardment kept me here, they voted. Every system, every governor, every fleet commander. It was efficient." Declan said nothing. He knew what efficiency looked like when it was pointed at you. My consort left this morning, my advisors yesterday, my intelligence chief the day before that. She placed the last piece of armor on the pile, straightened it. The bombardment was not to kill me. It was to keep me here while they divided everything I built among themselves. They did not even need me dead. They just needed me irrelevant. The word hung in the air between them. Declan had heard a lot of things in his career. Briefings about casualties, last transmissions from squads that didn't make it, the specific silence that follows when someone calls a name on comms and nobody answers. He'd built a system for it. He didn't grieve. He inventoried. He counted the dead the way other people counted spare change automatically without feeling the metal. But that word, irrelevant, said by a queen sitting in the ruins of everything she'd been, surrounded by people who died for a throne no one wanted anymore. That one got through. "Why are you still here?" she asked. "Told you, my ride's dead." "That is not an answer. It's the one I've got." She looked at him, and then a sound came out of her, low, involuntary, somewhere between her ribs and her throat. The translation implant didn't touch it. It couldn't. It was pre-language, something broken at the foundation. It could have been a laugh. It could have been something worse. Declan stood in the throne room of a fallen empire, his sock wet, his comms dead, his shuttle a memory, and he looked at the most powerful person he'd ever met, a queen of 11 sons, a sovereign of nearly 1 trillion souls sitting alone in the ruins of her life, because every single one of her subjects had decided she wasn't worth staying for. Every single one except him. And he wasn't even one of hers. He didn't say any of this. He didn't do anything noble or dramatic or worthy of the moment. He checked his ammunition, 14 rounds in the magazine, 1 spare. He checked the corridor behind him. Clear for now. "We should move," he said. "This place isn't defensible." The Queen of Nothing looked up at the human with the cracked boot. She stood. The tunnels beneath the palace were older than the empire itself. Sareth knew them the way she knew her own bloodstream, by feel, by memory, by the particular echo each junction made when air moved through it. She had studied them as a child, before she was queen, before she was anything that mattered to anyone beyond her mother. She walked ahead, the human followed. He moved differently underground. Up in the palace, among the wide halls and open corridors, he had run like prey, fast, low, reactive. Down here in the tight stone passages he changed. His steps grew deliberate. His breathing slowed. He checked every junction before entering it, pressed his back against walls before turning corners, kept one hand on his weapon and one hand trailing the stone like a blind man reading. He had done this before. Not here, not these tunnels, but tunnels like them. Places where the walls were close and the light was gone, and the only thing keeping you alive was the discipline of moving correctly through spaces designed to kill you. Sareth filed this information away. She was good at filing things. It was, in the end, what she had spent 40 years doing, sorting information into systems, mapping causes onto effects, finding the architecture beneath the chaos. She had governed 11 star systems through the simple principle that everything was connected, everything was structural, and if you understood the structure, you controlled the outcome. She had been wrong about that. "These tunnels," she said, her voice flat in the close air, "were built during the Second Silence, 4,000 years ago. The Valith were not yet unified. Warring clans used the underground networks to move between territories without being seen." Declan said nothing. He was listening, but the way a soldier listens, for threat, not content. The engineer who designed this particular network was named Aurel Savon. She built passages that could survive orbital bombardment, tectonic shifts, flooding. She understood that the thing above ground could always be destroyed. The thing below ground endures. She touched the wall as she walked. The stone was smooth. Thousands of hands over thousands of years. Aurel Savon was eventually betrayed by her own apprentices. They sold her designs to the enemy clans. She spent her final years in a cell built from her own blueprints. Declan glanced at her. You telling me about the tunnels or about yourself? She did not answer. They walked in silence for a long time after that. The junction came 40 minutes in. Two Valith soldiers, coup forces, wearing the new insignia that Sareth did not recognize and refused to learn, standing guard at a water access point. They were young, poorly positioned. One of them was eating something from a foil packet. Declan moved before Sareth could speak. She had seen killing before. Of course she had. 40 years as sovereign of a galactic hegemony meant 40 years of war, execution, judicial combat, and the quiet administrative murder that empires called policy enforcement. She had watched her finest duelists perform with blades that hummed at frequencies the human ear couldn't detect. She had observed fleet commanders dismantle enemy formations with the elegance of composers conducting symphonies. Declan did not fight like any of them. He fought the way a rock falls, with no artistry, no form, and absolute commitment to the ground. He closed distance like a man walking into a strong wind, took a hit to his shoulder that should have staggered him, didn't stagger, and put both soldiers down with his hands and a short blade she hadn't known he carried. It took 9 seconds. There was no grace in any of them. The soldier who'd been eating still had food in his mouth. Declan wiped the blade on his leg, checked himself for wounds, found one, a gash on his forearm that bled red, human red, startling against the blue-gray tunnel stone. You fight, Sareth said, like a piece of furniture falling downstairs. Yes, ma'am. That was not a compliment. Didn't take it as one. She looked at the two soldiers on the ground. Young. They had families somewhere. They had been someone's children before they were coup infantry eating dinner in a tunnel. She stepped over them. They reached the communication node an hour later, a small chamber carved into the bedrock, lined with signal equipment that was old but functional. Sareth activated the systems with the codes she kept in her memory, codes she had never shared, never written down, never trusted to any advisor or intelligence officer. Paranoia, her consort had called it. Foresight, she called it now. She cycled through frequencies, military channels, diplomatic channels, emergency bands, loyalist codes she had established decades ago for exactly this kind of scenario. Dead, captured, silent, turned. Every frequency was a door she knocked on. No one answered. She kept cycling. Her hands moved with the precision of long practice, adjusting signal strength, shifting bands, trying combinations. Declan watched from the doorway. He did not interrupt. He did not offer help. He just watched, and his face held an expression she could not read through his alien features, but she thought, if she had to name it, she would call it recognition. He had seen this before too. The motions of expertise applied to a situation already past saving. Hands doing what they were trained to do because the alternative was to stop, and stopping meant understanding. The last frequency returned static. Sareth turned off the console. She stood still for a moment. Her hands, four-fingered, long, built for the delicate work of governance, rested on the dead controls. How do humans handle this? She asked. Handle what? The loss of sovereignty. When your leaders fall, when your systems collapse, what do your people do? Declan thought about it. She watched him think, the way his small, flat face contracted, the way his eyes moved as though reading text that wasn't there. Mostly we get weird about it, he said. Build stuff in garages, write things nobody reads, start over with worse haircuts and louder opinions. She processed this. The translation implant gave her the words, but the meaning lived somewhere behind them, in a place she had to reach for. You rebuild, she said. We don't call it that, we just keep moving. Do the next thing, even when the next thing is stupid, especially when the next thing is stupid. She was quiet for a long time. The tunnel hummed around them. Somewhere above, her empire was being divided like meat on a table. "Show me," she said. Declan looked at her. The queen of the Valeth hegemony, keeper of 11 sons, standing in a buried room lit by emergency strips, asking a human sergeant with a cracked boot to show her how to lose everything and keep going. "Yeah," he said, "okay." They climbed. The tunnel system had emergency exits. Aurel Savon had built them 4,000 years ago because she understood that the thing underground must eventually surface. The passage narrowed, then opened, then delivered them through a crack in a hillside into open air. Sareth stepped out and looked up. The sky was ruined. Debris rings circled the planet where orbital stations had been. Burning wreckage drew lines of light across the upper atmosphere. The remnants of her navy ships she had named, commissioned, stood on the bridges of were scattered across the dark like broken jewelry. She looked at it, she did not flinch. Declan stepped out beside her. He looked up too. Then he looked down at his boot, pressed his toes against the inside. The sock was still wet. "Which way?" she asked. He pointed east. "There's an abandoned human outpost about 30 clicks that direction. Forward operating base. Coalition pulled out when things went bad. Should still have basic infrastructure." 30 clicks, she repeated. She had never walked 30 of anything in her life. She had been carried, shuttled, transported. She had moved between star systems the way humans moved between rooms. "Yeah," Declan said, "it's a walk." She looked east. Flat terrain, alien scrubland, a horizon lit by the death of everything she'd built. She started walking. Declan followed. His socks squelched with every step. He didn't mention it. Some things were too small to matter and too persistent to forget. They were, he thought, a lot like him. The outpost looked like a shipping container had fallen from space, and nobody had bothered to apologize. Declan loved it. Prefabricated walls, modular roof panels, a communications array that leaned 15 degrees to the left like a drunk man trying to look casual, solar collectors, water recycler, perimeter sensors, all dead, all covered in 3 months of alien dust, all fixable. He had been stationed at a base exactly like this one. Different planet, different war, same flat-pack military architecture that humanity scattered across the galaxy like seeds, hoping something would grow. That base had also gone to hell. Declan had been the last one to leave it, and he had left it running because turning off the lights felt too much like admitting something. He walked the perimeter. Sareth stood near the entrance and watched him with those black, unreadable eyes. "The structure is crude," she said. "Yep." "The materials are substandard." "Yep." "It appears to have been designed by someone who had never seen a building before and was working from a description given over a poor connection." "That's the human military, ma'am. We don't build pretty, we build fast." He found the generator housing, opened it. The power cells were drained but intact. The wiring was standard coalition spec, meaning it was ugly, redundant, and nearly impossible to break permanently. He pulled his multi-tool from his vest and started working. Sareth watched him for 11 minutes. He knew because he counted, not consciously. Counting was something his brain did when his hands were busy, a background process like breathing. He counted seconds, counted tasks, counted the dead, always the dead. "What can I do?" she asked. He looked up. The former ruler of 11 star systems stood in the doorway of a human field shack, her ceremonial robes dusty, her four-fingered hands empty, asking a sergeant for a job. "The water recycler is on the east wall. Panel comes off with pressure on the 2 lower clips. Inside there's a filter assembly, looks like a stack of gray discs. Pull them out, clean them, put them back. The order matters. Don't mix them up." She stared at him. "Please," he added. She went. The work took the rest of the day. Declan moved through the base the way he moved through tunnels, methodically, completely, one system at a time. Generator, comms array, perimeter sensors, water, air. Each task was a closed problem with a solvable answer, and solving it kept his hands moving, and moving hands didn't count the dead. Sarith, it turned out, was precise, dangerously precise. She cleaned the water filters and reassembled them in the correct order without being told twice. She rewired a junction panel using a pattern she'd seen Declan use once, adapting it for the slightly different configuration without asking for help, when a structural support on the comms array turned out to be cracked. She fabricated a brace from scrap metal, using techniques that Declan couldn't name, but recognized as engineering at a level his species hadn't reached yet. "You're good at this," he said. "I designed infrastructure networks for 300 worlds." "Right. It is not dissimilar, smaller, but the principles hold." She paused, looked at the brace she'd built, ran a finger along the weld line. "The principles always hold," she said, quieter. "It is the people who do not." Declan didn't respond to that. He tightened a bolt that didn't need tightening and moved on. The comms array came online at dusk. Declan adjusted the frequency range, boosted the signal with a modification he'd learned from a technician who died on his second deployment, and opened the scanning bands. Static, static, dead channel. Coup chatter, encrypted, aggressive, someone giving orders about supply lines and prisoner processing. Then, a fragment, weak, garbled, buried under interference like a voice shouting through a wall. Valith language, military encryption, old military encryption, the kind they'd used before the coup forces changed the codes. Sarith was beside him before he could call her. She'd heard it. Some frequency of it had reached whatever the Valith used for ears and pulled her across the room like a string attached to her sternum. She adjusted the receiver. Her hands moved the way they'd moved on the tunnel console, practiced, certain, refusing to accept silence as an answer. The signal cleared, partially, enough. 6 ships, a small Valith fleet cell hiding in an asteroid belt at the edge of the system. Loyalists. They had gone dark when the coup began, running silent, waiting for orders that never came. They did not know the Queen was alive. They were preparing to scatter, to break formation and disappear into the galaxy, each ship alone, each crew carrying the memory of an empire that no longer existed. Sarith sat down at the console. She closed her eyes, she breathed. Then she opened them and began to speak. Declan had heard her imperial voice, or recordings of it anyway. Translated propaganda clips played during coalition briefings. That voice was enormous. It filled rooms that were built to dwarf people. It carried the weight of 11 suns and the authority of 900 billion souls, and it sounded like the universe had a mother and she was disappointed in you. This was not that voice. This was smaller, lower. It was the voice of a sergeant talking to a squad that just got cut in half. It was the voice of a person who had seen the numbers and decided to speak anyway. "I am here," she said. "You are not alone. We are fewer now. We are less than we were." She paused. The static breathed around her words. "We begin." Declan realized he was starring. He turned away, found a junction box on the far wall, opened it, pretended to examine the wiring inside. The wiring was fine. The junction box didn't need him. He needed the junction box. The Loyalist cell responded 2 hours later. 6 ships, 2 damaged, crew totaling fewer than 4,000, against the hundreds of warships and millions of soldiers that had divided her empire among themselves. Sarith received the response standing up. She read the crew manifests. She read the damage reports. She read the fuel levels and ammunition counts and food supplies with the same expression she'd worn when removing her armor, precise, calm, folding each piece of information and placing it on the pile. Night came. Not real night. The planet's rotation was different from Earth's, longer, and the darkness fell in stages rather than all at once, the sky going from burning debris orange to deep violet to black. Declan sat on the steps outside the base. Sarith came out and stood in the doorway behind him. "Tell me something," she said. "What?" "Your assignment, before the coup, cultural liaison, what did that mean in practice?" "Means I make sure nobody on my side insults your people bad enough to start another war." Silence. The sky darkened another degree. "You mispronounce my species' name," she said. "Yeah." "Every time you say it." "Yeah." In formal context, it is a significant insult. Equivalent to, the closest translation would be calling someone's mother a type of bottom-feeding ocean parasite. "That's specific." "It is, and you do it every time." He looked at her. Her face was unreadable in the dark. Those solid black eyes caught the light from the debris field above them and held it like stones in water. "You never corrected me," he said. "No." "Which means either you don't care or you think it's funny." "Perhaps both." "Then I'm not changing." The sound came again, that low, involuntary thing from somewhere between her ribs and her throat. The same sound she'd made in the throne room. It was less broken now, only slightly, but he noticed. He didn't mention it. The next morning, the Loyalist fleet began its approach. 6 ships, 2 limping, all running dark. Sarith stood in the doorway of a human-built shack on a bombed-out hillside and accepted command of a navy she could count on one hand. Declan handed her a cup of water from the recycler. She took it, drank. "It tastes like metal," she said. "Yeah, that's the human experience, ma'am. Everything we build tastes a little like metal and works better than it should." She looked at the cup, then at the sky, then at the 6 dim points of light moving slowly through the debris field toward her. "Begin," she said to no one, to herself. She went inside to work. The Loyalist shuttle landed at dawn, and the first officer off the ramp stopped walking when he saw the Queen. Commander Tyrell had served Sarith for 22 years. He had seen her in the Imperial War Chamber, draped in ceremonial alloy, commanding fleets that blocked out starlight. He had seen her address the Senate, her voice filling a room designed to seat 11,000. He had seen her at state funerals, at treaty signings, at moments so heavy with history that the air itself seemed to bend under the weight of what was happening. He had never seen her in a human field jacket, kneeling beside a generator, holding a wrench that was too small for her hands. Declan stood behind her, drinking water from a dented metal cup. He nodded at Tyrell. Tyrell did not nod back. The other officers filed off the shuttle. 12 in total, the senior staff of the Loyalist cell, the highest-ranking Valith still loyal to the crown. They wore their uniforms pressed and correct. Their posture was imperial. Their faces, as they took in the scene, performed the Valith equivalent of a system crash, absolute stillness followed by a rapid series of micro-expressions that Declan's translation implant couldn't parse. Sarith stood. She did not brush the dust from the jacket. She did not remove the wrench from her hand. She looked at her officers the way Declan had seen drill sergeants look at new recruits, measuring what was there, discarding what wasn't. "Commander Tyrell," she said, "report." Tyrell reported, 6 ships, combined crew of 3,800, 2 ships with structural damage, 1 with engine trouble, weapons at 60% across the fleet, food for 3 weeks, fuel for 6 if they stayed in system, ammunition enough for 1 real engagement, maybe 2 small ones. Against this, the coup forces held 400 warships, control of all 11 systems, the loyalty of every governor and fleet commander, and the recognition of the allied Xeno coalition, which had wasted no time acknowledging the new government. Sarith listened to all of it. Declan watched her listen. She did it the way she did everything, completely, with the total attention of someone who understood that information was architecture, that every number was a load-bearing wall, and that you couldn't know which walls to break until you knew which ones held the roof. "Thank you, Commander," she said when he finished. She invited them inside. The human outpost was not built for Valith bodies. They had to duck through doorways, fold themselves into chairs designed for a smaller species. Tyrell sat with the stiff dignity of a man being asked to eat dinner in a child's playhouse. Declan leaned against the far wall. He stayed quiet. This was her arena. Tyrell laid out his strategic plan. It was thorough. It was intelligent. It was the kind of plan that won wars in textbooks and briefing rooms, rally loyalist sympathizers across the 11 systems, form a government in exile, petition the coalition for intervention, build a case for legitimacy through diplomatic channels. Sarith listened to every word. When he finished, she said, "That plan would have worked 10 years ago." Tyrell's face did not change. "With respect, Your Majesty, it is our best option." Our best option within the framework of imperial doctrine. Yes, I agree, and imperial doctrine is what lost us the empire. The room went cold. Not temperature cold, the other kind. Declan felt it from across the room, the kind of silence that happens when someone says the thing everyone was thinking and no one was allowed to voice. "The empire was lost," Sarith continued, "because I built it on a model that assumed loyalty was structural. I treated it as a feature of the system, like gravity, like atmospheric pressure, something that existed because the structure required it. I was wrong. Loyalty is not structural. It is chosen, every day, every moment. And the moment I stopped earning it, it vanished." She looked around the room, at officers who had chosen to stay, who had risked everything, their careers, their families, their lives, to be here. "You chose," she said. "I need to understand why." Nobody spoke for a long time. Then Tyrell said, "Permission to discuss a sensitive matter, Your Majesty." "Granted." The human. He didn't look at Declan. "His presence on your personal staff is irregular. It undermines the chain of command. The optics among the fleet crew are damaging. I recommend reassignment to a non-essential role." Sarith regarded him with an expression that Declan couldn't read but Tyrell clearly could, because he shifted in his seat for the first time since sitting down. "Commander," she said, "who held the perimeter of this base alone for 6 hours while your ships were in transit?" "The human, Your Majesty." "Who repaired the communications array that carried my message to your fleet?" "The human." "Who was the last person standing in my throne room when every subject of the Valith hegemony, every one of 900 billion, had decided I was not worth staying for?" Tyrell did not answer. "His name is Sergeant Declan Voss," Sarith said. "He stayed because his shuttle was destroyed and he had nowhere else to go. That is the only reason. He has told me this himself, with an honesty that I have not received from anyone of rank in 20 years. She paused. "I am issuing a field commission. The sergeant will serve on my personal staff, with advisory privileges equal to senior officers." Tyrell's face did several things at once. None of them were happy. The meeting ended. Officers filed out. Declan stayed against his wall. Sarith stayed at the console. The room emptied and the silence filled it like water. "You didn't have to do that," Declan said. "I know. It's going to cause problems. I know that too. Your commander looked at me like I was a stain on a formal uniform. He looked at you like something he does not have a category for. That is different, and it is his problem, not yours." Declan nodded. He didn't push it. Pushing things with Sarith was like pushing a mountain, possible technically, but the mountain didn't notice and you just ended up tired. That night, after the base was quiet and the fleet hung in low orbit like 6 nervous birds, Sarith sat alone in the command room. She did the math. She had avoided it for days. She had kept moving, walking, building, commanding, because movement was a kind of anesthesia. But now, in the quiet with the work done, the numbers came for her. 900 billion. That had been the population of the Valith hegemony at last census. 900 billion souls across 11 star systems, hundreds of worlds, thousands of stations and outposts and colonies. She had known the number the way she knew her own heartbeat, constantly, unconsciously, as the baseline rhythm of her existence. Her loyalists numbered 29,000. She had governed star systems. She now commanded a hilltop. The math should have destroyed her. The ratio was not just unfavorable, it was existentially absurd. A fraction so small it rounded to nothing. A queen of nothing commanding nothing from nowhere. But she kept returning to a number she couldn't make fit the equation. One human had stayed. One, for no reason more noble than a destroyed shuttle and a wet sock. One person from a different species, with no obligation, no oath, no structural reason to remain. And that one weighed more. She could not explain why. She had spent 40 years understanding systems, modeling behavior, predicting outcomes through the architecture of incentive and consequence. She had no model for this, no framework, no category. She was still wearing his field jacket. It smelled like human sweat and electrical tape and the particular metallic tang of recycled water. She should have returned it. She should have changed into something appropriate to her rank. She pulled it tighter around her shoulders and began planning the first operation. A supply depot held by coup forces 30 clicks northeast. Small target, manageable risk. A beginning. She assigned Declan to the ground team. She watched his biosign appear on the tactical display alongside her Valith soldiers, a single blue dot among green ones. Human among aliens, foreign among her own. She trusted the blue dot more. This thought should have horrified her. A queen who trusts an alien over her own species. A sovereign whose faith has narrowed from billions to one. It didn't horrify her. It felt like the first true thing she'd known in years. The kill fleet arrived on the 9th day. 12 warships, dropping out of faster-than-light travel in a formation so clean it looked choreographed. They appeared on the tactical display like teeth in a closing jaw, evenly spaced, perfectly aligned, each one carrying enough firepower to turn the continent below them into glass. Declan looked at the display. 12 against 6. 2 of the 6 were held together with the Valith equivalent of duct tape. One had an engine that made a sound like a dying animal every time it changed direction. "Well," he said. Sarith stood beside him. She studied the formation with the same calm she'd used to remove her armor in the throne room. Precise, methodical, the calm of someone who had already accepted the math and was now working the problem that lived behind it. "They sent 12, she said. "I am flattered. 12 is a lot. 12 is an insult. They could have sent 50. They sent 12 because 12 is enough, and anything more would suggest I was worth the resources." She turned from the display, looked at the room, her officers, her staff, the skeleton crew that represented the entire military apparatus of her counter-revolution. "Options," she said. Tyrell spoke first. He always did. "We cannot win a direct engagement. I recommend immediate evacuation. Break orbit, scatter, regroup at the secondary rally point. And then we reassess. We reassess, with 6 ships, diminished supplies, and a fleet that will follow us wherever we go." Sarith shook her head. "Scattering is not survival, it is slower dying." Declan was leaning against the wall. His spot. Every room they'd been in together, he found a wall. She'd stopped noticing it. It was just where he was. "I have an idea," he said. Every Valith head turned toward him. "It's a bad idea," he added. Sarith looked at him, those black eyes patient, waiting. "There are abandoned human outposts across this continent. Forward operating bases, relay stations, sensor posts. Coalition built them during the border tensions, pulled out when things went sideways. Most of them still have basic systems, comms arrays, signal emitters, power cells." He pulled up a continental map on the display. 14 dots, scattered across the landmass like freckles. "I can rig them. spoof fleet signatures, fake comms traffic, make it look like there's an entire armada down here, ghost ships, phantom squadrons, a whole fake war for them to fight. Their sensors pick up the signals, they split their fleet to engage multiple targets, and while they're chasing ghosts across the continent. We hit the flagship, Sareth finished. Yeah. Tyrell stared at the map, then at Declan, then at Sareth. His face went through a sequence of expressions that ended somewhere between nausea and grudging calculation. This is, he started, deception on a scale that violates every principle of Valith military doctrine, Sareth said. It is undignified. It is dishonest. It is, by our cultural standards, not just tactically offensive but aesthetically repulsive. She looked at the map for 4 seconds. Approved, she said. Tyrell opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. Commander, Sareth said, I lost my empire following doctrine. I will try losing a battle following a human. Declan moved fast. He had to. 12 ships meant hours, not days. He took a ground vehicle, a battered thing that Sareth's engineers had repaired using parts from 3 different species technology, and drove east toward the first outpost. Alone. The outposts were dead but not gone. That was the thing about human infrastructure. It was ugly, it was cheap, and it refused to stop existing. Declan moved through the first base like a man returning to an apartment he'd left in a hurry. Muscle memory took over. Generator here, comms array here, signal emitter here. He rigged the emitter to broadcast a fleet signature, not a real one, but close enough to fool sensors at range. A ghost ship, floating above a patch of empty ground. He set the comms array to cycle through standard military traffic patterns, broadcasting orders to units that didn't exist. Then he drove to the next one. And the next. 7 outposts in 9 hours. His hands bled from stripped wiring. His boot still cracked, still wet, squelched against the accelerator pedal. He counted stations instead of dead. 7, 8, 9. At the 10th outpost, he sat on the floor for 30 seconds. Just 30. His body wanted more. His body could go to hell. He stood up and kept working. In orbit, the kill fleet held position, scanning, analyzing, trying to understand why their sensors were showing fleet activity across a continent that should have been empty. Sareth watched them from the command room. She watched their formation shift, ships peeling away from the main group to investigate signals, captains second-guessing their data, the clean choreography of their arrival degrading into confused improvisation. She understood something about them in that moment. The coup generals had built their new order on certainty, on the belief that they understood the board, the pieces, the rules. They had modeled everything. They had accounted for loyalist resistance, coalition intervention, even the possibility of Sareth surviving. They had not modeled a human sergeant driving alone across a continent, turning dead bases into ghosts with bleeding hands and a broken boot. They had not modeled stupidity as a weapon. Now, Sareth said. The Loyalist fleet moved. 6 ships, firing engines in unison, driving hard toward the kill fleet's flagship while its escorts chased phantoms on the surface. It was not elegant. It was not doctrinal. It was 6 wounded animals lunging for the throat of something that had already turned its head. The flagship saw them coming too late. Its escorts were scattered, 3 investigating ghost signals in the southern hemisphere, 2 more chasing phantom comms traffic over the eastern ocean. The formation was broken. The choreography was gone. 6 loyalist ships fired everything they had. The flagship broke. Not exploded, broke. The distinction mattered. It cracked along its central spine, venting atmosphere and light, its forward section twisting away from its engine block like a bone separating at the joint. It was the largest ship in the kill fleet, the command vessel, the one carrying the general who had been sent to make Sareth irrelevant for the final time. It died ugly. The remaining coup ships scattered, not defeated, not destroyed, Confused, disoriented, unable to reconcile their sensor data with reality, unable to coordinate without their flagship, unable to do anything but retreat and regroup and try to figure out what had happened. Declan sat in the 10th outpost and watched the sky light up through a crack in the roof. He was too tired to stand. His hands were wrapped in strips of his own shirt. His boot had given up pretending to be waterproof. His comms crackled. Sareth's voice, coming through the speaker with the half-second translation delay that he'd stopped noticing weeks ago. "Sergeant." "Ma'am." "The flagship is destroyed. The remaining ships have withdrawn." "Good." A pause, the static breathed between them. "Come back," she said. He drove back. It took 3 hours. The vehicle's suspension was gone, and every bump went through his spine like a message from a god who didn't like him. Sareth opened a system-wide channel. She broadcast on every frequency, loyalist, civilian, neutral, even the coup bands. She wanted everyone to hear. She did not declare victory. Victory was a word for wars that were over, and this one was just beginning. "I have learned something," she said, her voice carrying across the system. "From the last species I would have expected to teach me anything." She paused, the kind of pause Declan recognized. The comedian's pause, the sergeant's pause, the pause that holds the room. When everything is lost, humans build in garages. They start over with worse haircuts. They stay in rooms they have no reason to stay in. She breathed. "I am in that room. I am not leaving. Come find me if you want to build." The channel closed. The silence that followed was enormous. Declan parked the vehicle outside the base, climbed out. His body moved the way wreckage settles slowly, with the creak of things that had been holding on too long. He sat on the front steps. The same steps he'd sat on that first night, when the sky was burning and his sock was wet and he'd stayed because there was nowhere else to go. Sareth found him there. She sat beside him, not across from him, not above him. Beside him on the same step, close enough that her arm nearly touched his. In 900 years of Valith imperial protocol, no sovereign had ever sat beside a foreign soldier on a set of prefab stairs. The cultural violation was so enormous it was almost invisible, like a crack in the sky too big to see. "You mispronounced my species' name in the field comms," she said. "Did I?" "Twice it has gotten worse." "I've been practicing." The sound came. The one from the throne room, from the tunnels, from the dark outside the base. The low, involuntary thing that lived between her ribs and her throat. But it wasn't broken anymore. It was a laugh. Just a laugh. Clear and whole and real, ringing off the prefab walls of a human outpost on a scarred hillside under a sky that was still full of debris, but also, for the first time in weeks, full of silence. Declan sat beside her and did something he hadn't done in years. He counted the living. The fleet crews in orbit, the officers inside. The Queen beside him, laughing at his terrible pronunciation, wearing his field jacket, planning a war from a shipping container. The count didn't take long, that was fine. It was enough. His sock was still wet. He didn't fix it. Some things were too small to fix and too stubborn to forget and too stupid to mean anything. They meant everything.